Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, sponsored by United Poultry Concerns. I'm your host, Hope Bohanec, and you can find all our past shows by going to our website, hopefortheanimalspodcast.org, and you can find my contact information there as well. Happy holidays to everyone. So today on the podcast, for the end of the year and for holiday time, we're going to do something a little different, a little special, and I have my husband and best friend, Cogen, joining me for our conversation today. Cogen and I have been together 21 years. This will be our 21st Christmas together, and both of us have been vegan for longer than that. And over those years, we've had numerous animal encounters, but sometimes those animals have been in distress, and we have jumped into action to help them. So we want to share a few of those stories here today. So a little about Cogen. He has his master's in Buddhism and his PhD in Eastern religions with an emphasis on Hinduism, and he teaches at a Jain academy. So he's very knowledgeable about all three Dharma traditions, and he teaches and translates Sanskrit, which is an ancient Indian language. And this has always been his passion. Ever since we've been together, he has had his nose buried in an uber-thick old book that's half in Sanskrit. So that's his happy place. Cogen has assisted me over the last 2 decades in my activism, and he has been there for everything, tabling, outreach, helping in any way he can. He edits everything I write, and in fact, he co-authored our book. I often say my book, but it's our book. He is the co-author of The Ultimate Betrayal. And he also plays beautiful guitar and is an excellent cook. We've always lamented that we have too many passions and didn't have the bandwidth to open a vegan restaurant because his food is incredible. I'm really the luckiest wife in the world in so many ways. So a quick announcement before we get into the conversation. I want to mention that I'm going to take a break from the podcast in January, and I will be back in February, early February. I've been doing this podcast now for 20 months straight during the pandemic, and I do it all. I seek out the guests, set up the interviews, record the interviews, all the audio editing and production and promotion and on and on. It's really rewarding. I have loved it. It's been so exciting to get into this new medium. It's been really, really cool to talk to all of you, but it is a ton of work. And I seem to always have numerous episodes in various stages of production, and I just need to catch my breath for a minute. And I also have a manuscript due for a book that I'm editing. It's the Humane Hoax Anthology that will be published by Lantern Media. And that manuscript is due very soon. It's exciting, and I need to finish it. Anyway, I'm sure it will go by in the blink of an eye. And if you haven't heard all the episodes, there's 58 episodes that I've created. Maybe you can go back in the archives and listen to a few of the older episodes if you'd like to fill that time. They are all on our website, hopefortheanimalspodcast.org. And I'll be back in action in February. So just taking January off. Back in action early February with new content, great interviews, and actually some other big news as well, but that will wait till February. Okay, and just a quick point of clarification. Cogen and I talk about how he was 100% raw food when we got together, and then I went raw with him. What we didn't say was that it was pretty short-lived. I was raw for about just under a year. Cogen was for about 4 years. Of course, we have been solidly vegan, enthusiastically vegan for all of this time, but just wanted to clarify that we're not raw foodists. That was kind of experimental. And there's a very important distinction, being that, of course, raw food, paleo, those are diets for personal health reasons. Veganism is not. Veganism is a justice issue. It's an environmental issue. It's a boycott of a detrimental and destructive industry. It's much bigger than just a dietary choice. That could be more thought of as plant-based, perhaps. But veganism has real-world life and death implications for sensitive and sentient beings. Okay, so let's jump into our conversation.
So theoretically, like I could say something really interesting right now. That would be the beginning of the show, right? Right?
Theoretically, yeah.
Okay, good. Well, this is fun. It's like you're all kind of blushy and nervous again. It's like we're on our first date. It's our first microphone date.
Our first microphone date.
Yeah.
Oh my God. All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Cogen Bohanec.
Why, thank you, Hope Bohanec.
It's so funny that you're here with me because you're always here with me when I am recording podcasts. You're just in the other room.
Yeah, I'm like 2 feet away instead of like 30 feet away, I think.
Right, exactly.
And less walls between us.
Less walls.
There are no walls
between us. There are no walls between us.
Technically.
Well, okay, so we're doing a little fun show, a little holiday show. Happy holidays to everyone, whatever your holidays are, whatever you celebrate. I hope you're enjoying them. And so recently, actually, someone asked us about our vegan origin story, like when we went vegan. And I often ask my guests what their vegan origin story is. And so...
This is fun.
What?
That we'll have like a different version of the same story?
Maybe.
Wait.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. Your
my vegan origin
Your vegan origin story. Because mine's much older. I mean, I went vegan about 10 years before we were in the same orbit. So just so people realize, we got together 21 years ago. This will be our 21st Christmas together. But we were in the same circle of friends for years before that. We were
25 years, I think we've known each other.
At least. Yeah, at least. I was dear friends with your sister, and I was over at your house.
Late 90s.
Yeah.
My mom's house.
At your mom's house, yes. Right, exactly. Your mom's house. And so we have been in the same world for a long time, but we were both vegan when we got together. You went vegan before we got together, but
I was a meat eater when we first met.
Were you?
I was.
Okay. So I didn't realize that.
Well, I was a lot of things when you first
Well,
met.
Yeah.
How far back in the origin story do we want to go?
Right.
Do we want to go to vegan origin story or the marital origin story?
Well, I think but they kind of overlap a little bit.
They do overlap.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is then who tells the story first? So do you tell my vegan origin story, or maybe you tell the marital origin story, and that segues into my vegan origin
Okay,
story?
Let's just stick with the vegan.
Okay.
I think that's more interesting.
Okay.
And at least for this audience, maybe. I don't know if they care so much.
Well, I mean, I guess the long and the short of it is you were friends with my sister. So I was kind of in rough shape. I had a hard adolescence when we first met. And you were friends with my sister, and I kind of like when you walked in the room, you were so sophisticated, and I was like, oh, and I looked up to you. And I kind of looked up to my sister as well, too, because she really kind of had her life together. She was going to college, she was doing good things, and she was hanging out with you because she was getting involved in activism. You guys were doing some like Earth First kind of stuff, and you were doing environmental activism. You actually did Sonoma County Earth First.
Yep.
And I went to one of those meetings. I'd just come off the road from a Rainbow Family Gathering, and I wanted to get my life together. And I was going to do that by getting involved in activism. So I did go to one of those Earth First meetings. But the way it went down is it wasn't really so much about proselytizing on the part of my sister with veganism. It was more of an antagonistic thing because my brother had already gone vegan. You had been influential on my sister who had gone vegan. So I had 2 siblings now who were vegan. Mm. And for me, it was crazy. It was like, no, we evolved to eat meat. Look at our canines. Oh, what would we do with all the animals if we are, like all those kind of things, right? Like, of course I went through the list. So what about protein? And I went through the usual list, and I just I was really trying to straighten my life out, and I was getting involved in spirituality as well too. And of course, you can't read very much spirituality without coming across the importance of compassion. And so it I guess appealed to me, but it still seemed kind of crazy. But I would argue
this is 25 years ago too.
25 years ago.
It's not as crazy now.
Oh yeah, there's no like McDonald's Impossible, burger or whatever, So I actually argued with my siblings for about a year. I was convinced they were wrong, and I showed them, demonstrated with the best reason that I could produce why they were totally wrong. But in the process, I had to get a job, and I was looking for work, so I got hired at the turkey leg booth.
Oh, that's right, at the Renaissance Fair.
Yeah. At the Renaissance Fair.
Oh, those turkey legs. Oh, they're so gross.
Yeah. So I would get up in the morning at about like 4 or 5 and drink about a pot of coffee on my way down to the booth. And they would put me in this like frozen sort of like tent weird room that was just frozen, right? It was a freezer. It was like a walk-in freezer that was portable or whatever. In this room, there would be floor to ceiling stacked boxes full of like blocks, like frozen giant ice cubes filled with turkey legs. Ugh. And then they would give me an iron bar, like a piece of rebar about 1.5 feet long. And my job was to spend the day violently like attacking these turkey leg ice cubes with a rebar, piece of iron to break them apart so that I could give them to the cooks on the barbecue out front. Yeah. And then in between that, every so often we sold like ribs and chicken too. So I'd have to like cut all the gore off of the meat. And, I was just kind of like in this actively engaged debate year long with my siblings about, the virtues of vegetarianism and veganism. And it just got hard to argue with it when you're immersed in meat all day long. Wow. Vegetarianism starts to look pretty appealing. So the one job perk, and I was pretty, this is a very, very low wage job, so I had almost no money. But one of the job perks was that you could eat whatever you wanted from the booth for lunch. So I'd get like 6 pieces of meat, right? And I'd be sitting here like gnawing on this stuff, and it already looks gross because you've been in the back, like seeing the like, behind the curtain sort of like the stuff nobody should see. Right. And so it's already kind of gross because of that. But as I'm like pondering my my year-long debate with my siblings, it no longer, I just couldn't do it anymore. Here I was, I'd engaged with all the statistics. Everybody was reading John Robbins' Diet for New America. So there was like you could feed, world hunger, 16 pounds of grains equals 1 pound of beef. Like, I knew those arguments by heart because I'd heard them from my siblings, but they failed to persuade me. That's why, like, logic doesn't really impel behavior the same way emotion or affect does. Yeah. Sensory data will hit you with such a force and vivacity that it will cause you to act in even ways that will bypass your rational mind. Right. And that's kind of what happened to me. It's like all the logic in the world couldn't do it. But once I just deeply realized how absolutely disgusting eating meat was, then that's kind of what turned me. And I never ate another piece of meat again. Wow.
Yeah. So then moving on to veganism. So that was vegetarian and...
So it was, I obviously knew that like, milk was liquid meat. And the eggs is basically the same, I knew that from the onset. There was never this like revelation that, oh, dairy is the same as meat, because my sister was already vegan and she already knew all that. She'd been preaching the, Diet for New America lines, which you were using for your vegan talks, by the way.
Yeah, back then.
I remember your old copy of Diet for New America. You had like highlighters everywhere. You had like, flags and, but that's in the future. I'm not there yet. So what happened is, I'd been reading a lot about spirituality and everything. Compassion was becoming increasingly important to me. And I'd been raised in this very sort of adolescent machismo. It's just very stoic. Emotions were weakness. anger, and and I kind of came to realize that I sort of lacked a sort of ability to feel in general. Like my emotions just weren't there. I felt like a robot. And when I started reading about like compassionate to all sentient beings, I was reading a lot of Buddhism back then, and I was just kind of like, how do I connect to that part of me that like is pained when I see somebody else's pain? Like I didn't even feel my own pain. How could I feel somebody else's pain? Well, I eventually lived in a place that had little lambs next door, and I would kind of make it a practice to go like look at them and try to connect with them and then try to feel them with my heart rather than my mind. And in the process, I would kind of like almost shame myself for eating dairy. One day I just couldn't do it anymore. And so it was kind of much more gradual, but it took me a year from vegetarian.
Oh, that's not
vegan.
Very long.
Yeah, it wasn't very long.
It was 4 years for me between vegetarian and vegan.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, because I knew from the onset. Like, I think a lot of people go vegetarian and they don't realize.
Right. They don't know.
Yeah. That animal products are more or less the same, or dairy products may even be worse. I mean, like, they don't do that. But I knew that right off the bat because my sister indirectly through your influence. So that's like sort of the indirect component to it. So I got a question for you now.
Oh.
So wait a minute. So what happened with me is I was just like getting my life together. And so then suddenly I was like this Mr. Super like a virtue guy, right? Like I went from like, trying to get my life together to getting a job to being vegetarian to being vegan. I quit smoking, I quit drinking, I quit, those sort of things. Then I was like, this quitting thing is working pretty good for me. Why don't I just, I don't know, quit eating cooked food? Because I'd been exposed to the raw food community. And I went totally raw. And that's kind of where you entered more directly into the story.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's so funny that you say things like that you didn't feel like you were a compassionate person and that you had to really work to be a compassionate person. Because when I first knew you, when we were, kind of in the same circle of friends, you were just this, I mean, to me, you were a shining, beautiful white light, white knight of compassion and virtue, compared to everybody else. So it's just interesting that
that's
you
funny
took that
because
journey.
That's when you first noticed me. But keep in mind that I already knew you for probably about 2 or 3 years before that, and that's what you were to me.
Wow!
Right? Like that you that me that you saw. That was modeled after the you that I saw.
Wow.
Like when I first met you, because remember, I was pretty messed up back then.
Yeah.
And I saw you and I asked my sister, I said, who is Hope? And my sister said to me, forget it. She's way out of your league. And you were way out of my league. But then after a couple of years, I managed to kind of get in your league.
Yeah. Well, and even beyond doing the raw thing, that was, and I was enamored of that. I was interested.
Then the tables were kind of turned.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, who's this raw food guy?
Yeah.
Whoa, raw food guy.
Right.
And then there's the sushi story, of course.
Oh gosh, we're gonna do that. Well, I wanted to get into the animal rescue stories, so we could go on and on like this forever. I don't know if people find this interesting or not.
That's the genesis. So our marital, the thesis is our marital genesis story and my vegan genesis story are really interconnected.
Yeah,
the same. That's the cool part. About that.
Yeah, and the other cool thing, and this is doing the work that I do. You just don't know what your influence is. It's so hard to know sometimes. I mean, you hear from people and I'm so grateful when I hear from people that, that listen to this podcast and it affected their life, and, changed their life and that kind of thing. But the cool thing to me is that my husband went vegan through my influence before we were even together.
Or
so
really even hanging out.
Right.
But I will say one more thing if I can on this subject.
Yes.
And that's how I fell in love with you.
Okay.
Because what made me fall in love with you, by this point, I was Gandhi full on. I renounced cars. I wasn't buying things. I wasn't using toothpaste. I
remember that.
I would shower.
You would shower outside
with a
cold garden hose. Oh my God.
In the winter.
I remember
in Camp Meeker where it was freezing. I refused to use hot water because it was beneath me. It was too damaging to the environment, right? I was full on Gandhi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was nobody like that, but you were doing the activism. And the way I felt,
well, I didn't take cold showers, but
no,
I was
you did.
doing,
But you were doing the activism that I aspired to.
And I admired you doing all of this incredibly hard renouncing and asceticism.
Yeah. Like you admired my austerity. I admired your activism, and I often will tell people that I married my wife because she's the closest thing to Gandhi that I ever met. But the last thing I want to say about this is your vegan talks. Your vegan talks. Hope was doing vegan education since like 1997, 1998, 1999, and it blew me away. To come in. I went to probably about 5 or 6 of these vegan talks of yours before we were even together. And I'll just never forget like that essence of who you are right now, to really emotionally connect to the story and the plight of animals. You know, I'll never forget you with that, you know, Diet for New America underlined with the highlighter, the Xerox, like pieces of paper, then that zine that you had made at home just from like a Xerox machine and an X-Acto knife and Kinko's.
Yep.
I mean, it was so endearing, and it's been really great to watch, you know, how that same essence of who you were then is only just kind of transformed in the information age.
Yeah. Wow. Cool. So I want to switch directions a little bit and talk about some animal rescue stories, because we, over the years, have had numerous situations where there's been animals in trouble and we've jumped into action. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's you, or sometimes both of us. And we have a few of these stories that I think would be fun to talk about. And the first one I think would be the rabbit on the freeway. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
That was harrowing.
Yeah, and I just
you didn't get my joke. Harrowing.
Oh, from like hair. I was actually pondering that we've never named that rabbit.
We didn't name that rabbit, and that's unusual for us because we name random animals. We name all the animals around us all the time.
And we name kitchen appliances.
Yes,
all kinds of things. But
that's true. We never named that rabbit.
I'll think about it.
Yeah, he didn't want a name. Okay.
He's too wild.
He's too wild. So what was happening? Here's the story. We were driving down the freeway, 101, if anybody knows the Bay Area, coming from the North Bay into San Francisco, driving down 101. Lanes of traffic. I mean, just like three or four lanes of traffic.
I think
going
it's about
one
4
way.
or 5 at that,
yeah,
at that moment.
It's huge. A huge freeway.
It's right when Nevada's turned to San Rafael, so it's getting pretty thick there.
Really thick. Going fast, 70, 80 miles an hour, right? We're in the fast lane. And I don't know who saw him first, but there was a rabbit who was running between the median. There was like just a concrete, 5 foot, 4 foot median, and our lane of traffic, which was maybe like 2 feet.
Yeah, well, what had happened is because the construction on the freeway, there was no distance at all between the concrete barrier and our lane.
Yeah.
There was like
there wasn't a shoulder at all.
Yeah, there was like a stripe of white line. So that rabbit, I don't think he had 2 feet.
Yeah.
I think he had probably less than a foot.
Yeah. And he's just booking. He's running.
As fast as he can.
As fast as he can. And I thought if he makes one slight little change of direction, he's going to hit a tire.
Yeah, and you know how like that would be really weird for a rabbit to keep going straight and not turn.
Yeah.
And it just, you could see it any second now he was going to turn.
It was so...
And he was going fast enough that we could see him for a minute before like...
Yeah, well, no, he was running with us for a minute. It was in our view.
Yeah.
And we were like,
terrifying.
and then we just blew right past him. And it's like, what do you do? We were like, oh my God. We were freaking out. And at that moment, I was like, okay, he's dead. I mean, I have to just think about him as dead because there's no way he's getting out of that. How is he going to get out of that alive? And I was like, okay, I just have to let go. That poor rabbit is dead. Yeah. But you were at that point getting over to the exit. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like what's the plan moment?
Yeah.
Like, what do you do?
What do you do? But you headed over through this thick traffic to the exit. And I remember at that time going, well, what can we do? But you just like, we're kind of
pulled over to the side of the road. We'd already passed them by about a quarter mile.
Yeah, we got to the next exit and pulled over.
Yeah, and then we got out of the car and we just were like, what do we do? What do we do?
Yeah, we're looking back.
No plan.
There was no way to get back to him.
Yeah, and so I said, well, look, I'm going to take the exit. I'm going to cross over. I'm going to go back a mile and then come back and see, like, I don't know what I'm going to see, a dead rabbit? I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I just said, I can't just walk away from this situation. And
I love you for that, because I had let go. I had been like, there's nothing to be done. I don't know what to do. And you were just like, no, and luckily you were driving, because you just kept taking the road back. So we exited, took the overpass, went back to the next exit back, and we weren't even sure if we were behind the rabbit. We weren't sure where he was, right?
Yeah, and so I just kind of repeated what we were doing. I went to the left lane, and we started driving, and damn it, that rabbit was still there. And I was like, he's there. So we slowed down. You slowed down and slowed down and slowed down, and we slowed down. It felt like we stopped pretty quickly to me.
Well, yeah, I guess so we had to.
Because we only had a second before we'd pass them.
Right,
so we kind of so we're like 70, 80 mile an hour traffic, 5 lanes, tons of cars.
Yeah.
And it was like, we're just going to stop.
Yeah. And so we just stopped behind this rabbit, and we were going as slow as the rabbit.
Yeah.
And finally, I was just like, just stop the car. Just stop. We have to stop traffic. And that's when I started jumping into action. Yeah. So you stopped the car. I jumped out, and it was like, all I could do was think, I just got to stop traffic.
Yeah, you were.
And so I'm waving my arms. I'm like telling people, stop. And lane by lane, people were stopping.
Yeah, you managed to do it.
And I don't know what you were doing. What were you doing at that time?
I was wondering what the hell you were doing. I mean, I was kind of stunned. I was like, I got us this far. I don't know what's happening now. And I got out, and I just started, and I watched the rabbit. I think that, like, what I was doing is I was, the rabbit would run, and I would get in the car and pull it up, and you would walk, and you would say, like, we were kind of jockeying a little bit with that. Yeah. And I just didn't know what to do, because the rabbit, like, he just kept going forward, and I couldn't pass him.
Yeah.
I just stayed behind him, and I just didn't know what the plan was.
Yeah.
How do you get inside the rabbit's head to get him to
tell
turn?
Him what to do, or that it's safe? Yeah.
And then the real hero of the show.
Well, that's right. It
wasn't us. It was okay. So this crazy guy, so we'd stopped traffic. There were still some cars creeping past, and it's cool. Actually, the neat part about that was like the bell curve.
You could really see the bell curve of society.
Yeah,
because there were people yelling at us.
5% of the people giving us the finger and throwing things at us.
Right.
10% of the people telling us how awesome we were, but not getting out to help. And most people just like, whatever,
what's going on?
Crazy people playing in traffic.
Yeah.
So this fellow, he did a U-turn on like 4 or 5 lane freeway and drove oncoming into traffic so that he could stop the rabbit and get the rabbit to run off of the freeway.
He helped so much. He stopped
like
3 lanes of traffic.
Wouldn't have happened without
he turned completely around and was facing the traffic.
Drove head on into 101 traffic so that he could stop.
And that was it. That was like, that's what we needed.
Yep. And right when he came up to that rabbit, the rabbit took a right turn.
Yep.
Headed towards the shoulder.
Yep. And that's when everybody had stopped because of this guy.
Except for that last lane.
And the last lane, the slow lane, people were still coming, and the rabbit
was that moment of slow moment where we're like,
it was slow motion. Yeah, totally. He almost got hit, but he made it.
Bam! And then he flew
made it across the street. We couldn't believe it. It was.
I don't think it.
It was a miracle.
If you've never saved an animal's life, I don't know, man. That's one of the biggest ecstasies that you can experience. It really is.
Yeah, we were crying. We were high on just the whole scene was insane. But it was beautiful. It was beautiful that he made it. Thank God he made it. Yeah, it was a powerful moment. And then, of course, we fell in. That was us renewing our marital vows. So it was that's why we're together. Yeah. We worked so well together. Yeah. Well, we read each other's minds. Yeah, right? You did one thing, I did the other thing. And that's how we've been in these kind of situations, is that
we suddenly seem to do what the other one can't and know what the other one needs. Like we somehow like lock into a unified conscious field.
Totally.
All telepathic, marital telepathy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So rabbit lived, rabbit survived.
Yes.
He needs a name. Maybe somebody could name him. Send in your name suggestions for the rabbit. Beautiful rabbit. All right. Well, let's move on to Frankie. This little animal we did name. Frankie was a little kitten that we rescued. And this one was fairly recently, is when we first moved here to Elk Grove in Sacramento.
We rescued him from Franklin Avenue.
Right. That's why he was called Frankie.
The clever name.
Yes.
Which usually if there's a clever name, it means you came up with it, not me.
Oh, I'm pretty much, I am better at naming things. So Frankie. So I used to walk outside. That has since changed since I got a treadmill, and I love my treadmill. But I used to do this walk around it's kind of like a creek area, like kind of, they call it the Laguna. It's like wildlife habitat, beautiful area. But this one part, it comes right up on Franklin Boulevard, but it's very wooded. It's like, I don't know, what would you call that? Just kind of like wooded area down to a creek, basically. And
chaparral, maybe.
Oh, is that what it's called?
I think so.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Well,
Okay.
Maybe I made it up.
So anyway, so I was walking on my morning walk, just getting some exercise and listening to a podcast. Actually, I had my headsets in, and I could hear over my podcast this crying. I mean, it sounded like a baby crying, but I knew it was a kitten. Like I could immediately identify that it was some little kitten just crying. And I was like, what? Where is that? So I looked around for him. I couldn't quite find him. And then I saw him, and he was way down in this gully, like down, really steep, very wooded, lots of trees and brush. But I was in this little clearing. I spot him, and he was this little gray cat, little kitten, tiny, tiny. And he was just sitting there crying, just like, meh, 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 and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And I didn't know what to do. I kind of stayed with him. I called him. I tried to get him to come up. That didn't do any good. I stood there. I must have stood there at least, 15, 20 minutes or something before I even did anything, because I just didn't know what to do. A couple of people passed by, and I even said, this guy passed by, and I remember going, there's a kitten.
It was like your universal translator. You were translating what the kitten was saying.
Yeah, right, exactly, right. Help. I know, and the guy was like, and he just kind of walked by me. Like, I don't know what to tell you, lady. So I didn't know what to do. So I started making calls, and I called some friends that are in the area, and I was like, what do I do? Is there because we were new to the area too. So I didn't know what the humane societies were like. I didn't know any of the rescues. I felt very helpless. And finally I called you.
Well, I believe you called me about 3 times.
Yeah.
I don't think it was till the 3rd call that I actually came out and did something.
Yeah. Because I still wasn't sure if I should just leave him, because I thought, well, maybe his mom's somewhere and his mom will come back or something. I just wasn't sure what to do. Yeah.
Like when you first called me, I got the call, and you told me the whole thing, and you were distressed.
Was I?
Well, yeah, and then it kind of kicks me into a mode of what do I do? My wife is distressed, and you were like, who should I? And then we kind of talked about it, and you'd be like, okay, I'm going to call this person, and you hung up and called this person. Like 10 minutes later or whatever, 15 minutes later, you called me back.
Yeah.
Same thing. And then they're going to call back, and I don't know who's then. They weren't open or whatever it was. Yeah. And finally, on the 3rd one, you were in tears.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I'm now remembering. I got so upset because I just didn't know what to do, and the poor little thing had not stopped crying.
Well, I think
it was like an hour at that point, and he had just been nonstop crying.
Yeah, and your concern was he was just going to run into Franklin Boulevard, which is a massive street, and he's a silly little kitten.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he was so close to this very, very big freeway. But I couldn't get to him was the thing. It was just such thick brush. I couldn't get to him. I didn't know what to do.
And so
Yeah.
then I was just like, okay, well, I'm coming. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't, again, no
And-
plan.
Yeah, and I wasn't really asking you because I know you were working and you were
Yeah.
busy, but I was so glad you were like, okay, I'm on my way. And I was like, thank you. I need another brain on this. We gotta do something. And you had the brilliant, one of the rare moments of brilliant
total
ideas
genius.
about.
Will go down as one of my most genius moments in life.
Anyway, you had the brilliant idea to get a little nutritional yeast because you knew kitties love it. We've had kitties in the past that have loved nutritional yeast. What even made you think of that?
I don't know that I really thought about it. I was just like running out the door. I'm like, keys, wallet, nutritional yeast, let's go.
Oh, really? That's amazing because I wouldn't even thought. I wouldn't have thought that.
It was just a total impulse, and
Wow.
I didn't even know what the plan was. Like, what am I going to do with the I just grabbed it.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing because it ended up being essential to the rescue.
Yeah, so I get out there,
Yeah,
right, and
yeah.
you're like looking all distressed, and I look at what's going on, and you're standing on the sidewalk of this major boulevard,
Yeah.
and there's like kind of an embankment that goes like a straight drop,
Yeah.
about probably maybe 20 feet,
Yeah.
and then it's like briar patch,
Yeah,
and
just
like
thick
I mean,
woods.
of course, like how do
And
you
there was
get in
one little bare patch that he was in,
Yeah,
but the rest of it was just so wooded.
It was impossible.
Yeah.
It was like a human being can't even go down there.
Yeah. But guess what? unless they're Cogen. You did. You just booked. You just hit it. You just went. I mean, you basically fell down there because it's just steep. Got down there.
Yeah, and I had to get on my belly, right? So like I'm kind of crawling on my belly under these like thorns, and I mean it was literally like blackberry bushes and chaparral. I mean, it was so thick that like I couldn't even get on all fours. It was like on my belly, and of course anytime I get within 15 feet of the cat, what would he do? Turn around and run away.
Yeah.
But he knew, right? Like he kind of had this sort of internal conflict. He was like, I need help. The humans are here to help me.
Yes.
But they're scared.
But I'm scared.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, cats always do that. Cats do that on a good day. Like, pet me, no, don't. Pet me, no, don't.
Yeah.
This guy was like, rescue me, no, don't.
Yeah.
Rescue me, no, don't. He's like, nope, they've come to kill me. I'm out.
Yeah.
Wait, I need help. And so he was having this sort of like dilemma. And in the meantime, I'm like on my belly crawling after him. And so I just kind of like reached in and pulled out the nutritional yeast and started just, for whatever reason, kind of sprinkling it around everywhere, and it got his attention.
Yeah.
So he kind of like turned around and came at me finally, because I think he was really hungry. I mean, who knows how long he'd been there.
Yeah.
And he smelled the nutritional yeast, so he kind of turned around, came in my direction, and then passed me up in the other direction where I had sprinkled some nutritional yeast. And he started just like licking it off the ground and the dirt. And that's when I was like, okay, so now he knows I'm a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we did that for another few minutes, me crawling on my belly, him like, help me, no, don't. Help me, no, don't. And then finally, he started to scurry up a tree, and that's kind of where I knew I had him.
Yeah. There was this tree was very diagonal. It was kind of like going along
45-degree angle.
And it was going along the embankment that went up to where I was, up where the sidewalk was. So the tree was kind of running along that whatever that side
embankment.
But so he scurried up the tree and you went after him.
I'm like, okay, so we're gonna climb trees now.
Yeah.
And so I climbed. Of course, it got higher and higher and higher and higher, and I get about, I don't know, like 20, 30 feet up in this tree. And this is kind of a rickety tree too. Like it's not like a sturdy...
But it wasn't 20 feet off the ground. Like if you had fallen, you would have fallen onto that side thing that was only about 5 feet.
Oh, maybe that's how it looked to you.
Oh.
To me, it looked like I would die. Fall in the thorn bushes. But maybe I just think of myself as heroic. But
well, you were in this very, very heroic.
Maybe a little. So I climbed up this tree, and he got to a point where he just couldn't go any further, and he's just crying and crying and crying. And I reached out, and I grabbed him by his, like, what's that called? Like his haunches? No, I grabbed his hips.
Oh, that's
like
right, his back. Yeah.
And I grabbed him, and I flipped him upside down because, like,
he's tiny.
No other way of doing it.
Kitten. Yeah.
And he went from cat in distress to demon cat real quick.
Yeah.
His ears pinned back, his paws opened up, and he took a slash at me too, right? He got
he was like hissing and slashing, and he slashed at your face, but he got your neck.
Yeah, so I had to cut him on there. But I managed to grab him and climb down the tree and then bring him up to Hope.
And then when luckily there was a towel in the car that you had brought. So I found that towel and immediately just put him right in the towel. I wrapped him in the towel and we got in the car and I sat him in my lap and he was purring and biscuits, that where they're kneading the dough like biscuits, his little paws. I mean, he just immediately, like we laughed that he went from demon cat to like, oh, purr and biscuits and I'm okay now.
So that's like an inside joke for us, like going from demon cat to biscuits.
Yeah. In a matter of seconds. In a matter of seconds, he realized.
Change the mood. Yeah,
he just realized. He knew we were friends. He knew he was safe. So that was really precious. Yeah, that was precious. I wish we could have kept him. We should have kept him.
Well, we were renting back then.
We were renting and we were unstable. Yeah. We weren't sure how long we were going to be. We might have needed to move.
Yeah,
so we couldn't keep him.
But we always imagined he's got a nice home now. Yes. And people who love him. He sure was sweet.
We took him to the shelter and he got adopted. So little Frankie.
Frankie, wherever you are, your original parents still love you.
Yes. All right. Well, the third story is, this one is not a rescue story. Well, no.
Which one?
The bear in Tahoe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I know of at least two more after the bear, but okay, tell me the bear.
Oh, what were you thinking of?
Oh, I thought you were going to go Cucuta.
Oh, Cucuta. I've told Cacuta's story on the podcast.
Well, you haven't heard it from my perspective.
Oh, well.
Okay, let me tell you my version of the Cucuta story.
Okay. Well, and just so people know, and I'll actually maybe put it in the show notes, I already told the story of us rescuing this rooster, Cucuta.
And by us, she means her.
Yeah, I rescued him, but then I brought him home, and you took care of him and got to know him too.
Yeah.
So I'll put the longer story in the show notes. But did you want to say something?
Well, the only thing I would say is just how crazy it was that you just drove home one day and you had this giant chicken like in a cardboard box in your car, and he was covered in blood with his like eyeball looking like it was gonna fall out of his head.
Yeah.
And once again it was like, what's the plan?
Yeah.
He was a rooster, so nobody wanted him. No rescues could take him. And so we brought him in the backyard and nursed him to health, and he ended up being really, really sweet. But it's just one of those moments where it's that same sort of impulse where you're in this situation. If you stop and think about it, you don't act.
Right.
But sometimes your heart takes over and your heart impels you in a way that your rational mind couldn't. And I think that's what happened with your little chicken.
Yeah. No, it's true. I realized there was a moment where I realized that his life was in my hands. It was like with Frankie, I couldn't walk away.
Yeah.
At that moment, I was going to be the deciding factor if that animal lived or died.
Like bloody chicken in the car it is.
Yeah. And, I had no choice. I mean, there's just no choice at that point. I don't know about others, but I can't walk away, So
I think it's the best in humanity. I think all of us have that in us.
Yeah, we do. And we talked about that actually in our book, in The Ultimate Betrayal, how when someone's driving down the side of the road and they see an animal in distress, our impulse, our instinct is to help. We want to help that animal. We don't think of dinner. I believe our true nature is compassion, empathy. We want to help.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a philosophical debate on whether human beings have a essence or not, but I believe they do, and I believe that our essence is good. I think that we are defined more by our highest ideals than we are by our failings to meet those ideals. I think our ideals are what define humanity.
Yeah, kind of like how we are, striving to cause no harm. And even being vegan, of course, it's not perfection. There's things that we do daily that cause harm, but we're striving. That's our ideal. Our ideal is compassion and complete nonviolence.
Yeah, we're all impelled as humans as living beings, to try to be as happy as possible.
Yeah.
But I think with humanity, we get a little confused about what that source of happiness is. And once we discover that our truest happiness comes from helping others, which is what our stories here are illustrating, is how much joy that's brought to us, just the small act of saving an animal's life, as soon as we discover that the true source of happiness is in helping others, that's when we're really able to achieve what we've been looking for all along, and that's happiness. And I think in that sense, we can see that humanity is essentially good.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about the next story, the fourth animal that we have helped along our journey together. And again, this one wasn't necessarily a rescue. It was more just helping this animal, and it was a bear in Tahoe. So this was really recently. This was just this summer, right?
Yeah, just a few months ago.
Just a few months ago.
Maybe 6 months ago.
Yeah. And less than that, I think, because it was the summer. And we were taking a trip to Tahoe. Tahoe, we're very lucky to be very near Lake Tahoe now, and it's so beautiful. And we found this lovely hike that we love, up Rainbow Trail or what was it, Rainbow Road? I don't know where we are. Anyway, we took our hike and we were driving around the lake, and there's a road that, circles the lake that is very busy, actually. Often there's a lot of traffic, but it's just a one lane, one side, whatever, 2 lanes of traffic. And there's some commotion ahead. Like there's something, everybody's going really slow, and there's some kind of something happening, and all these people are like kind of pointing, and I look up and there's a bear just like right there. She couldn't have been more than 20 feet up. It was kind of like there was a little hill on the side of the road, a little bit of a grade, and she was up at the top of this hill, really close.
Yeah, there was like a fence that was about 3 feet high, like one of those rustic looking wood log fences or whatever.
Yeah.
And she had her front paws on the.
Yeah, she was up on the fence. Her front paws were on the fence, and she was kind of crying. She was like
crying.
She was going
crying. A lot of noise. Very vocal.
And it was like, what's going on?
She was again looking for somebody who could translate bear into human. Who's got the animal universal translator? Well, this is the magic to me of this whole story, is the way she singled you out. I mean, there were 1,000 people there. Everybody's gathering around. People got cameras. We're surrounded by cars as it is, but she was specifically looking at you.
Well,
that's how I saw it. That's how I saw it.
So we had pulled up, and we were we were right in front of her, and I had rolled down my window, and I could just see her. And I was like, what does she need?
Yeah,
what's going on?
Once we saw that there was a bear calling out, that's when we kind of stopped the brakes and tried to stop traffic again, or at least we just stopped moving.
We stopped moving.
There was something weird going on.
We knew there was something going on, and I couldn't figure out what was happening, because it was obvious she was in distress. And I was like, is she rabid? Does she want to attack someone? What's going on? It was kind of like unclear. And then I saw somebody pointing to the other side of the road, and you saw them first. You said,
"There's cubs.
There's cubs. Yeah. There's 2 cubs over there."
Yeah.
And
baby bears.
Yeah, there were baby bears on the other side of the road.
And she'd been separated from her cubs because of the traffic.
That's right. Somehow she crossed and they didn't, or they crossed and she didn't.
There was no way of rectifying it. And of course,
and there were so many cars now.
They would get hit by the cars if they tried to get to their mom.
Yeah. So as soon as you said, "There's cubs," you were like, "Look, that's what she wants. There's cubs." I jumped out of the car. I was like, okay, that's it. Pull over, stop the car.
Yeah, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, that was kind of scary for me, to see you get out of the car. I mean, I think what I first said was...
We're really close to this bear.
I think you said, "I'm getting out of the car," and I said, "No, you're not."
Oh, that's right. That's right. No,
we're 20 feet away from
this bear.
A very upset bear who's looking at you and making some pretty distressed sounds, and I did not want you getting out there and getting with this bear who's clearly very upset. So I was kind of resisting to the idea.
Yeah, no, that's true. I remember I was like, I should get out. I need to get out and help. And you were like, "Don't get out of the car." You were like, "No."
I was scared.
Yeah, you're like, I could tell you felt it was dangerous, which it probably was.
It was probably dangerous.
But as soon as I realized what was going on, what needed to happen.
I think that's when you kind of realize that it wasn't malice. She was
just
for
wanted
help.
her cubs.
She wanted help.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I was like, no, I'm getting out. And I jumped out of the car. I didn't want you to have to talk me out of it again or to try to talk me out of it again. I jumped out. And I ran in front of the car and then started stopping the other side of traffic. Because our car was stopping one side. Yeah. But I started stopping the other side of traffic. And luckily, a woman with a bike, once again, the wonderful helper, it's like when you're the initiator, there's people that will step up and help. It's such a beautiful thing to see,
There's like 1% of the population that's the initiator, but it's like 30% of the population that will actually
be the helpers.
Help,
right,
yeah,
so exactly.
Be the initiator.
Right, exactly.
There's more people on your side than you realize.
Yes, that's right. It's so beautiful. So I was trying to stop the traffic. The gal, she saw what was happening too, and she brought her bike out right to me, and she stopped the other side of traffic with her bike, which was great. And then we just waited, and everybody was kind of like, it got kind of quiet. I remember we were all like, we knew what was happening. Like everybody that could sense what was happening knew, well, okay, so now is she going to go to the Cubs? Is the Cubs going to go? Yes, the Cubs going to come to her? What's going to happen? And you know what happened is her call changed. I heard it change. Her call went from distress
to like, okay, come here.
It was amazing. It really was. When she saw what was happening, and I looked at her, I was like, you're good. Get your babies. It's okay. Yeah. And her call went from to more like it was like come here.
How did that go again? Since you speak beer, clearly,
I do. And those little cubs, they immediately just ran across the street, got back with their mom. Everything was good.
I think you forgot one small detail.
What?
Well, I jumped out of the car and got out there and started chasing them.
Did you?
Yeah, I circled around.
Oh, that's true. You started going around to try to kind of, to kind of...
I don't know if I did a lot of good, but...
Well, I think they were already on their way.
That's what I was trying.
Well, good job. Thank you. You tried to help.
Participation points.
But so the cubs ran across the street, ran up the hill to their mom. Their mom gave them little nose touches, and they ran off together, and they were gone. And I was again, my heart was so warmed and so just full of love to know that we did it. Once again, we stopped traffic and saved the animals. I guess actually it is similar to the rabbit story. It wasn't really a rescue. It's a
I think the element of danger is a little different. Like with the rabbit, it was dangerous because the traffic was
so
going to
fast.
kill us.
Yeah.
But with this one, it was like the bear was maybe going to maul you. Yeah. Actually, I thought it was. I mean, that's why I was like, don't get out of the car.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I guess I'll jump in front of 70-mile-an-hour traffic, but getting in front of an upset bear, I'm not a big fan of that. I was scared. But you, again, just jumped right in. But I think you really had that sort of knack, that sort of intuition, that empathy to be able to hear what she was saying. Like you knew what she was saying. Yeah. You could tell that it wasn't an angry, like I'm ready to start taking out some tourists kind of gal. It was more like, hey, could somebody help me get my cubs, please? Like you were able to realize that that's what it was. You know, and I mean, even the way you describe her change in tone, like
it was amazing.
In tune to that.
That's I think that is really the whole point, is that this little rabbit on the freeway is significant enough for us to risk our lives to save this rabbit. I mean, it was significant enough that his life was that important to me, to you, to several people that helped. It's like we need to get to that point where all life is that precious and that sacred that you take the time, you do whatever you can to save that life.
Yeah, and when you see another animal in suffering, the distinction between human life and animal life just kind of disappears. You don't see it. All you see is suffering. Suffering, like difficulty, heartache, like you relate. You know how that feels to be in a difficult situation and to want help.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the moment where there is no multiple species. There's really just life, compassion, and action.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, this was really, really wonderful and fun to reminisce.
There was one more that was really, really profound for me.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we weren't the main players in it. I mean, we were just kind of
Helping?
They're helping.
Are you talking about Turlock?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's interesting, maybe it's not. But what was fascinating to me about that one.
Well, let's maybe give a little background about what it was. Do you want to tell?
I think you know better than I,
Okay.
but I
Well,
think
there
it's.
was an egg farm out in Turlock, California. This was years ago, 7, 8 years ago. And the farm had gone out of business, run out of money or whatever, and they just stopped feeding the birds. And someone discovered or reported to someone that there were birds starving that hadn't had food and water for like, a week in this building. And there was like, whatever, 20,000, 30,000 birds that were starving to death in this building. And so Animal Place, animal rescue in that area in Grass Valley, sent the word out for help. People came from all around to help rescue as many as we could. I mean, they let us into the building, were letting us just take as many as we could out.
There were animal activists and organizations from like all over the Bay Area.
Yeah, it's true. It wasn't only Animal Place. There was a lot. And I remember they sent us to go. They had run out of crates.
Yeah.
They had filled up all the crates they had in that moment, and they sent us into town
Yep.
looking for cardboard boxes.
Yeah.
And we were like behind liquor stores looking for cardboard boxes to put birds in. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was really profound to me just to see, well, first of all, having been a vegan for 20 years at that point, I'd never really like been in a facility like that and to actually be there. So we spent like the entire day, somebody inside the facility handing crates of chickens out. And then we were kind of carrying them to the various different vehicles that would then drive them away to different sanctuaries.
Right.
But the thing that really kind of struck me the most was these were birds that had never been outside. They'd never seen sun. They'd never touched the earth. They'd never scratched. And it was really this like sort of eerie thing where there would be hundreds of birds that we'd like set on there was like the small pebble gravel that where we were all parked and we were doing all this, and the birds would get set down on this gravel in the crates, and there was this like really eerie sound of hundreds of chickens pecking the dirt like they do to get the pebbles, because that was an instinct that had been denied to them.
Yeah, it was the first time they had ever had ground under them.
And there's something, there's something really profound about that. Like a being who had never been able to express even their most basic needs for the first time, this sort of frenzy of like, it was really, really, that to me is what I remember the most about it, was that, and then, seeing everybody working together and just how we were all kind of really just sharing in this moment. And I don't know, it was a pretty profound moment for me to kind of really see, again, humanity at its best. Animal activists are really the best of us.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people who, they do everything to help the less fortunate, the animals who are overlooked by other forms of altruism. And that's why I really am always very moved. But it was very nice to be amongst those people and to see that all happening. And then there was like a documentary made on it.
There's a documentary called Turlock.
Oh yeah.
And so if anybody wants to see that, I'll maybe put a link to that film in the show notes. Yeah. Turlock, about that rescue. Yeah, it was huge, and I think we ended up rescuing hundreds of birds. From that.
Well, it was fun to follow up for the next weeks after that and you see where they'd all gotten placed, and people were posting about what the birds were like, and they were kind of recovering from all of that, and it was pretty profound to even be part of that or to witness that for both aspects, to see how horrible the facilities actually are.
What I remember about that facility was all the waste was just somehow draining under the building. The building itself was up about 4 feet, and there was like 4 or 5 feet under the building where all that, it was just the most disgusting smell.
Yeah.
All the liquid waste was just under the building somehow, and it just stunk.
Well, anybody inside had to be in a full like hazmat suit.
Yeah, the people that were going in were totally in ventilators and everything.
It's like, well, wait a minute, if you've got to like wear a hazmat suit to go in there, what's it like for the birds? But that was a pretty harrowing one.
It's always one step closer to liberation for all of them. When we care about one, we care about 20, we care about 200. Eventually we will care about them all and be able to rescue them all, I hope. Well, this has been really fun. I've loved having you on. It's interesting because, I get very nervous about this podcast every time. Every time I do the podcast, whether it's me, especially when I am interviewing a guest, I get very, I'm so nervous about it. I want it to be so good, all of that. But this has been so fun. Like I've just been so casual. It's just us sitting here talking like we always do. So that's been great. I've really enjoyed doing this with you so much.
Yeah, it's kind of been like bring your husband to work day.
Yeah, right. Well, and I want to have you on again. We're gonna do this again, and we're gonna talk about your specialty of religion and Eastern religions and veganism and animal rights. So we'll get into that. Thanks for being on, Cogen.
All right, thank you for having me on.
Of course, of course. I love you.
I love you too. I hope that makes it on the show.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast. So I want to say that listening to this episode, I don't think I gave Cogen the credit that he deserved, really, for the rescue of Frankie, the kitten. It was so heroic how he just jumped into action and somehow got down that really steep embankment with the brush and briars. I mean, I thought we were going to have to get like firemen in protective gear with special equipment to get to that kitten. But Cogen just busted down that hill in just pants and a t-shirt and crawled under the brush and climbed up that tree. I mean, it was heroic for sure. And I fell in love with him all over again, as I do every day. So I definitely want to have Cogen on again in the new year to talk about his specialty, which is Eastern religions and veganism and animal ethics, of which he knows a great deal and has some really, really amazing insight. And we've also, over the years, come up with philosophies, he and I. Visceral veganism is one of them. Hypocrisy versus complacency is another. So we'll get into all that. So stay tuned for next year's episodes, and I'm sure that we will have Cogen on again. And just a reminder, as I said in the beginning, I will be taking the month of January off from the podcast, and I'll be back in action early February. If you enjoyed this episode, please scroll down on your listening app and give us a 5-star rating. Maybe share this episode with a friend or on your social media. Your support and love is so appreciated. I really hope that you have wonderful holidays, however you celebrate, and I hope that they're filled with love and warmth and vegan hot cocoa. So please include compassion in your celebrations and live vegan.